Welcome back, Madden fans, to another video brought to you by Cincy Kid Gaming. In today's video, we explore how long it would take to rebuild the Bengals and bring them back to being a contending team. Without further ado, let's jump in. Alright, and so the point of this rebuild here is to be as realistic as possible. I wanted to see, with the knowledge that I have as a Bengals fan, putting myself in the shoes of Mike Brown and the Brown family, the Blackburn family, and just see, based on how they think, how they act, how long would it take to get a successful Bengals team? And by success, I'm talking consecutive playoffs for multiple years, but more than that, deep runs into the playoffs and hopefully even a Super Bowl. If we get a Super Bowl at some point in the next several iterations of this rebuild, that would be the ultimate goal. I would call that a successful rebuild, and we would be able to definitively say, if the Bengals play their cards right, this is how long it takes for the Bengals to have a competitive team, a team that we want to be able to watch, and a team that is going to compete in the highest stages. That is our goal as Bengal fans, and that should be the goal of the organization as a whole. So, couple rules as I start into this endeavor. We're not going to just trade Andy Dalton, trade AJ Green, trade Carl Lawson, trade Sam Hubbard. Like, I'm not dumping players to get a bunch of draft picks. That's not the point of this. I want this to be as realistic as possible. So, for example, one of the big decisions I'm going to have to make is going to be on AJ Green's contract. Another big decision I'll have to make is when do I draft the quarterback of the future? And so to answer some of those questions, for example, my current mindset with the Dalton contract is I'll let him play out this season, and we'll see how he does. If he ends up having a really successful season and him and Zach Taylor have a great marriage and things are going well, then I probably keep him on because I think that's what the Bengals will do. It might not be some 5-year mega contract, but maybe I'll give him 3 years and see how we do. And so that's kind of what I'm planning here. I'm not offloading a bunch of players to get a bunch of draft picks. This isn't try to see if I can get 5 draft picks in the first round. This is what would the Bengals do? What could I see them doing to get back to contention after we've started this current season 0-3. I think Bengals fans just need a little bit of hope right now. So hopefully I can provide an answer for you. Before I fast forward to the end of the season and kind of go over some of the season statistics, I wanted to give you a look at some of the modifications I made to try to make this as realistic as possible. To start, we'll take a look at the roster here. Madden is limited in its roster construction and what it can do. For example, they didn't even have Cordy Glenn. They had him starting still. Obviously, he's been out for 3 weeks now. So I've got Andre Smith in, and this is pretty much what the Bengals' offense has looked like up to this point. As you'll see down here in the corner, Pharaoh Cooper, I will be releasing him after 2 weeks like the Bengals did. I'm going to try to keep this roster as good as, or as realistic and as how it has been in real life up to this point. So I will be making some roster changes to try to keep it consistent with what we're seeing on the field. For the defense, which is probably the biggest question you guys have, this is how I currently have it constructed. For that defensive line, I've got Sam Hubbard, Geno Atkins, Billings, and then Dunlap. And then for the linebacker role, you can't only have 2 linebackers out there. I know the Bengals are mostly rolling with Vigil and Brown, but I do have to have Evans in there on the right side. That's just a quirk of Madden roster construction. So Evans may get a little bit more playtime than he does in real life, and that's just one of those things I can't help. But if I jump over to the specialists here, my nickel and dime defense, I am rolling with Dunlap, Atkins, and Lawson, with Nick Vigil and BW Webb in the slot, which is what we've pretty much seen. Hubbard seems to be starting over Lawson, and then Lawson is getting in there in the special situations. The offensive specialists, I've just got Boyd and Erickson in the slot, and then Bernard for the third down back. And I think that this is probably as realistic as I can get the roster at this point. Once again, I'll be bringing Darquez Denard in when his time on the PUP list is over. Currently, and actually I don't think it even shows the injury list, but currently Jeff Driscoll is on the injury list. I don't have a way to cut him. Madden doesn't let you cut your players that are on injured. So I'll just have to wait until he's no longer injured, and then I'll drop him at that point, because I know that he filed his grievance and is no longer with the team. But I think that's it. Since at this point I do know the result of the first 3 weeks, all being losses, I did go ahead and pre-program the schedule to have the exact result of week 1 and 2, and then the results so far through the day on week 3. At this point that I'm recording, all of the noon games are done, so those are all actual results, and then the rest of them will be simulated. But I think that solves it all for now. When we pick up again at the end of the season, I'll go over the player statistics for the season, I'll go over contracts, I'll go over drafting and what I've been doing for scouting, and then we'll head into the off season, we'll do some drafting, and we'll see if we can construct a Bengals team that's going to compete. I can't wait. So I'll catch you guys in just a little bit here at the end of the season. Alright, welcome back guys, and as we close out the season here, we'll look at some stats, and then we'll start the off season, and we'll get a look at re-signing players. I'll show you what we've been doing as far as scouting, and then we'll jump into free agency and the draft, and see what we can do here in the off season. Your record for your Cincinnati Bengals this year ended up being 4-12. We did end up missing out on the playoffs, obviously, at 4-12. But our schedule here, actually, that's not the screen I wanted. Sorry about that. You know what? Maybe that was the screen I wanted. Hold up. There we go, regular season. Alright, your schedule here. Obviously, we started with 3 losses, Seahawks, 49ers, Bills. And then we won a close one against the Steelers for our first win in the Zach Taylor era. Unfortunately, we followed that with losses to the Cardinals, Ravens, Jags, and Rams before we came to our bye week. Coming out of the bye, a quick loss to the Ravens before we beat the Raiders, take one to the Steelers, beat the Jets, and then lose to the Browns, lose to the Patriots, before ending the year with wins against the Dolphins, and then loss to the Browns. So, not great, ending our year 4-12. I think you saw down in the bottom left, bottom right corner here, the Browns end up winning the division 11-5. The Ravens end up coming in at 10-6. Steelers 6-9-1, and then we are in the AFC basement there. So not great for our Bengals. Statistically, we end up having the second worst offense in the NFL. Our defense ends up coming in at 22nd. Not a good look for our Bengal team. Andy Dalton just does not have a good year. Only 3,147 yards, 275 out of 436 for 63 completion percentage, and he throws 17 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, which just is not good enough. So we will be looking for Andy Dalton's replacement. I did get Ryan Finley in the last game of the year to give him some action and see what he could do. Ended the year with a 60% completion percentage and 2 touchdowns to an interception. Not great for our Bengals passing offense, but that's that. Rushing, Mixon ends up only getting around 830 yards. If what we've seen so far this season is any indication, that might be about right. Through 3 games, the running numbers have been paltry at best, and it doesn't look like they're going to get better quickly. The offensive line just has a lot of work to do, and I think that's what you're seeing here in this simulation as well. Giovanni Bernard did get a substantial amount of carries, but he also was having issues in the run game. We come down, look at the receivers here. AJ Green ends up getting about 700 yards. Boyd ends up with 660. Ross 557. All fairly realistic numbers depending on how long AJ Green is out. In this simulation, I had him come back for the Pittsburgh game. So 705 is probably a little lower than you should expect. I would expect it to be a little closer to 800, maybe closer to 900 there. Just shy of the 1,000 for missing the 3 games. Tyler Eifert did end up getting injured in week 14. Based on his injury this season, I think if he gets injured, the Bengals are going to try to get him on a cheap deal. If he won't take the cheap deal, then they'll probably just let him go. So that's going to be my plan as I go into contract negotiations. AJ Green, you want those numbers to just be a little bit better. Glad we're getting Bernard into the passing game. That's a good sign. Willis ends up having 136 yards on 12 catches, which might not be that far off. I think he does get a little bit more play time than he probably did in the simulation. But that's about it for your offense. I guess we'll look at the O-line real quick. Trey Hopkins ends up giving up 8 sacks. Corey Glenn ends up giving up 8 sacks. Bobby Hart 7, Miller 4, Jordan 3, Smith 3, and Price. Price actually ends up starting 14 games. We had an injury to Michael Jordan, and so I end up sliding Billy Price into the left guard spot. And then towards I think in week 11, I swapped Smith in for Bobby Hart, and so Smith ends up closing the year at right tackle. At that point, I swapped Price in for John Miller, and so Price ends up at right guard, and so the line at the end of the year ends up being Cordy Glenn, Mike Jordan, Trey Hopkins, Billy Price, and then Andre Smith. Alright, on the defensive side, Preston Brown ended up getting injured in week 6, and so Jermaine Pratt comes in week 6 and keeps the starting job. I think when Preston Brown was able to come back in week 11, Jermaine Pratt had already passed him for tackles for the season. And that was a pretty good indication to me that he was getting the job done at the linebacker position. So Pratt comes in with 110 tackles. I'd be interested to see where he's at on the Defensive Player of the Year list. Ends up with 2 sacks and an interception, so really good year for Jermaine Pratt. I think if his numbers look anything like this in real life, I think Bengal fans are really happy and hopeful for what the future holds. Nick Vigil ends up having a lackluster season, as does Preston Brown, and I think at this point that's kind of what we're expecting. Dre Kirkpatrick does end up with 4 interceptions, but once again the tackle numbers are just a little down in the dumps there, and that's just not what you want to see. William Jackson only ending up with 1 interception. That's not what you want to see. At this point, I think it's safe to say that Madden just also doesn't have a very good respect for the Bengals backfield. And so I guess that's something that we'll need to keep in mind going forward. The defensive line then, Atkins ends up with 7 sacks, Hubbard ends up with a sack and a half, Evans a sack and a half, Dunlap 3 sacks, B.W. Webb in his limited role before Darcus Denard came back ends up with 6 tackles for loss, so that's a stat. Besides that, Carl Lawson gets injured pretty quickly. I think he only plays 4 games or so before he retires his ACL, and you never want to see that, but he's becoming a liability at this point. For the back end of the roster players, you just have some meager results as you would expect, but yeah, Carl Lawson being so far down here is quite surprising and definitely not good. Injuries can just derail a career, and it's real disappointing. He did end up with 2 sacks on the year though, so that was kind of nice. Not much to say with the kicking game. Randy Bullock, 14 of 18 isn't great, but that's what you kind of expect from him. Kevin Huber, excellent punter as always. So that's our statistics for the 2019 Bengals. Once again, we end the year at 4-12, and it's just not where you want to be. But on the bright side, Zach Taylor gets contract extension, 4 years. So that's, take that for what it's worth. I'm going to jump ahead to the next week real quick. I'll skip ahead to the Super Bowl. At that point, we'll know the yearly awards, and we'll see if there's anything notable happening there. At this point, since we're here, I'll just show you what I'm doing for scouting. The first thing I did was go through and scout all the quarterbacks. And through the scouting of the quarterbacks, Craig Roy here looks like the guy I'm going to be targeting, out of Oregon State. Projected to go late in the first round. A+ throw power, A- accuracy. So That's looks pretty good. If I miss out on him for some reason, Michael Bullard from Ball State down here might be a late target. These don't typically pan out well, but he's there, and as long as I'm sure that I need to be moving on, I'll be taking a guy until I can find the guy that I want, the guy that I think will be the one. Our record 4-12 left us with the 3rd overall pick, so I'll be keeping that in mind as I look through here. But from there, after I scouted the quarterbacks, I went through and scouted linemen, because we clearly need help on our offensive line. The kind of thing I'm looking for when I'm looking at linemen, I'm looking for guys like this D'Angelo Payton out of Ohio. He's projected to go in the 4th round, but if you see over by his name, he's got the diamond with the 2 in it. That means that he's actually a 2nd round talent. So these are going to be my bread and butter. These are going to be the types of guys that make or break the draft for me. So my goal for the draft, the way that I feel like the Bengals typically approach the draft, in round 1, we're going to try to go best player available, position value, and if possible, need. But I feel like 9 times out of 10, Bengals like to go best player available, so that's going to be our approach as we head into the top of the draft. The 2nd round will be more geared toward need. I think we saw that this past year when we took Drew Sample for the tight end, and then it just seems to be a theme. The 2nd round seems to be more need-based than best player available. In the 3rd round, we're going to be trying to look for position value. That's where I'll probably take my first lineman. And then after that, you typically see in rounds 4, 5, 6, 7, it's usually free agent preference. You usually just try to get in there and grab guys that you want first dibs on when it comes to free agency. So that's kind of how we're going to approach the draft. I'll be definitely looking into some of these guys here in the 4th round that are supposed to be 2nd round talents. And I got a couple of those through most of the offensive line, except center. There's not really any good centers this year. So that's it. That's what we're trying to get done here as we head into the draft. I will keep simulating through here, and I'll pick up with you guys again when we get to time to re-sign players and start the free agency process. Alright, Super Bowl's over. Patriots won 35-17 over the New Orleans Saints. We're going to jump into re-signing players. The Bengals had a rough period for re-signing players. We got Leroy Reynolds re-signed to a 1-year deal. I don't even know if he's going to be a Bengal at the end of the season. They may have just picked him up short term when they made that move this past week. But he made it through the whole season in this simulation. He had decent production when he did get on the field. I needed him when Preston Brown got injured. And so he earned his re-signing, in my opinion. I'm not going to re-sign Dino Boyd. I don't think he stays on the roster the whole season. We do need line help. I just don't think it's going to come from him. AJ Green initially told me that he was not interested in re-signing with us, which is, I guess, technically possible. What he's saying right now in the media contradicts that. So I just ended up franchise tagging him. I don't think the Bengals let him go. I think the Bengals end up getting a deal done with him. But for the sake of this simulation and trying to keep this as realistic as possible, I just ended up franchise tagging him, and I'll try to sign him to a 2-year extension next year. That was my goal. I was trying to get him on a 3-year deal. As it is, he'll get paid the $17 million next year on the franchise tag. Tyler Eifert decided he was not interested in signing with us. I wasn't prepared to overpay him or give him a long contract when he's just been too injured, guys. You can't count on him. He never makes it through a full season. So I gave him an offer. He turned it down. He's going to test at the free agency. If he doesn't get picked up in free agency, I might bring him back. Darkes Denard, same thing that happened last year. I gave him an offer, and he turned it down, so he'll be testing out free agency. I re-signed Nick Vigil on a 2-year deal. I do plan on hopefully drafting a linebacker to compete, but if that doesn't end up happening, the draft doesn't go the way I hope it does, I do have Nick Vigil sticking around to help bridge the gap and hopefully be a veteran leader for the young linebackers. Re-signed Andrew Billings. Depth is just always need depth, so he's back on a 1-year deal. Actually, I think I gave him a 2-year deal. I think he declined it. Now that I see it down here on the bottom, not interested. Pretty sure he did end up declining it then. Clayton Fedulum, got him back on a 2-year deal. Kerry Wynn decided he didn't want to play for us, and that's fine, I guess. We got Ethan Carter re-signed, got Trey Hopkins re-signed. I'm not going to re-sign Alex Redmond. I think the only reason he's on the Bengals roster at this point is because he doesn't count towards their roster spaces at this point, so why not have an extra lineman, especially when that's an area of weakness. But I don't think he's gonna end up sticking on the roster when it's all said and done, so I'm gonna let him go. Tony McRae, I re-signed for 2 years. Brandon Wilson I got for another 2 years. Jeff Driscoll, obviously he's not even on the team at this point, so I'm just gonna let him walk. And then John Jerry, he's just too old. It's time to let him go. He played fairly well this year, but we're gonna try to get a big upgrade on the offensive line in the draft. So that's how we did for our re-signing of our players. Ideally, I would have liked to get Tyler Eifert back, but it just wasn't in the cards. And then Darkes Denard, good luck, buddy. Good luck. So as we end free agency here, I end up signing 4 players. We ended up getting 2 offensive linemen. First we got Gassett out of Cleveland, and then we ended up getting Milata out of, he used to be an Eagle, and then I got 2 linebackers. Luvu is currently playing for the Jets, and then Hardy Nickerson was there at the end of free agency, hadn't got an offer yet, so I brought him back, and we'll let him compete again in training camp, and we'll see how he does this time around. So I'm gonna fast forward through the end of free agency, and we'll get the draft kicked off, and we'll see how it goes. I ended up having 37 players that I would consider drafting. We're drafting 3rd this year behind the Buccaneers and the Dolphins. Let's look at my draft board real quick here. if the top quarterback in the draft is still available to us at 3, I might take him, and that's Anthony Black. But we'll see what happens here. We got the Buccaneers on the clock. Let's see what they do with it.
The Dolphins are now on the clock.
And with the first pick in the 2019 draft, the Buccaneers select Lindsey Atkinson out of LSU.
The Bengals are now on the clock.
Alright, and so with the first pick in the with their first pick in the draft, the Dolphins go with quarterback Anthony Black. He was supposed to be the best quarterback in the draft. I'm not really surprised. I think that that's what the Dolphins are going to end up doing in real life. So let me check and see, because with one of the quarterbacks off the board, I definitely want to make sure I get my guy. It doesn't look like he's projected to go until the back of the first round, pick 26 it looks like. I will just take him. I'm just gonna take him because in real life there's always a quick grab for quarterbacks at the top of the draft. So if we're trying to keep this as realistic as possible, I think the Dolphins just grab the top guy. I need to grab my guy, or I think that's going to be the most realistic way to do this, which really stinks because I really wanted to see if I could get 3 of these top 17 guys I got on my board, but looks like I'm just going to have to be okay with 2 of them. I am going to grab Craig Roy out of Oregon State, the quarterback. He will be our quarterback of the future, and I'm going to end up dropping our 5th round quarterback that I had on my board off because we're not taking 2 quarterbacks. But Craig Roy, A+ throw power, which will be nice because Dalton has sometimes had a weak arm, so it'll be nice to be able to throw them deep down the field bombs. But he ends up having some pretty good short accuracy. Definitely something that we can develop. I'm going to take him, even though Madden's going to tell me it's a bad pick. He ends up being a 72 overall. He's got a hidden development trait. He was ranked 16th. He was the 16th best player in the draft, which is about what you expect when you draft a quarterback at the top, right? 9 times out of 10, the quarterback you're drafting at the top is not necessarily the best player in the draft. So pretty happy with this pick. He's going to come in and sit behind Dalton for a year and then take over in year 3 of this rebuild. Pretty excited to see what he can do. So we'll jump forward through the rest of the first round. Alright, and when we jump back in here for pick 2, there was a run on offensive linemen, which got me scared for a moment. But as I looked at my draft board, the remaining players that I have round 1 grades on are all in the 3rd round, so I didn't feel like it was necessary to jump back up and grab one of these other guys here. My pick is going to be Philip Scarborough, right guard out of Tennessee. Pretty strong, 38 bench reps. Looks like he pretty much killed the combine, so he's going to be our pick. Pretty excited for this pick. Get some help on our offensive line and really help shore up that right side as we try to rebuild this offense. And he ends up being a 77 overall. He's the 5th best player in the draft, and we drafted him at pick 35. So feel really good about this pick, and I think our draft is off to an excellent start at this point. So I'll pick it back up for the 3rd round pick. And okay guys, I'm sweating here. Oh man. Somehow, some way, we've made it to the 3rd round, and the linebacker that I've been eyeing for the past 30 picks is still here. Kamal Key out of Villanova. He is projected to go in the 3rd round. We're round 3, pick 3 currently. but he is flagged as a first-round talent. We're going to grab him, and we're going to bring a big improvement to our linebacker group. Kind of stinks because by the time we get back to our 4th-round pick, I expect a lot of these guys here to be gone. But we'll address that. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, Kamal Key, first-round talent. We've ended up with 3 first-round talents in our first 3 picks, and we've hit arguably 3 important positions in need. I don't think you can do much better than that, so we're gonna get Kamal Key here. He's also very fast, which will be good change of pace from Preston Brown and Nick Vigil, who have proven to be a little bit too slow at the position. He ends up being a 72 overall. He's ranked 17th in this draft. He's the 17th best player. We got him at pick 67. An excellent pick. He's going to have an immediate impact on that defense. Jumping into pick 4 here, and looking at our draft board, there are still a couple guys that I was looking at. D'Angelo Payton would be a good pick if we want to double down on the offensive line. We would be able to flip him over to right tackle, and that would give us a nice young core for our offensive line. We'd have Jonah Williams, Billy Price, Trey Hopkins, and then the 2 linemen we drafted in this draft if we ended up going that route. Big B here looks like a pretty solid player. He killed the combine, which is always good to see. We don't need help right now at the safety position. Bates, Fedulum, and Williams really got it locked down. So I think I'm going to steer away from grabbing him. Rashawn Bentley would also be a really good pick at this point. We only signed Billings to a 1-year extension, so we will be needing to find someone to replace that production on the defensive line. But I think right now value meets need. We're going to grab D'Angelo Payton. He's another guy to add to our offensive line, and hopefully this will really help us get going in the right direction on the offensive line.
The Raiders are now on the clock.
And he ends up being a 69 overall. He's ranked 46th, 46th best player in the draft, and we got him at pick 99. So once again, really solid pickup. He'll definitely be a guy that we'll have for depth initially, and maybe he can win a starting job somewhere on the line. Alright, and so we're jumping into the 5th round at this point. Every player is going to have some issues, but as we look at our draft board here, things have really been picked apart. There's really not much left going on here. We can grab Jalen Weldon. He's a pretty solid linebacker. Otherwise, we can take a flyer on someone else, or we can trade back and try to get some more picks for next year. Just kind of scanning through here. I think that's what I'm gonna do. I think I'm gonna trade back and try to get some picks for next year, and then either hope that my guy is still there, Jalen Weldon, hope he's still there for round 6. If he's not, if neither of these guys are available, we might just take a flyer on a receiver or running back, something, but we'll see. So as we look at our trade options, looks like Baltimore's willing to give us a 4 next year. I'd rather not give it to someone in the division, The Rams are offering a 4 and a 7. Other than that, we're just getting some offers for some 5s, and these are really bad offers. I'm kind of disappointed in the offer simulator because, like, these are straight up round 5 for round 5. It's just kind of, will you drop back 15 positions for no reason? Man, that's silly. I don't really like any of these offers, to be honest with you. The Rams gets us a 4 and a 7. Maybe that 7th can be packaged in a trade up or something. But I think the Rams are going to do better than the Ravens, and so I think the Ravens is probably a better deal. And it does get us a... it does take away a pick from Baltimore next year. So maybe I'll look at it that way. Maybe I'll trade this pick to them now, knowing that there's not really any good players available, and they'll waste this pick, and then next year we've got an extra 4th to play with. Like I said, I think Baltimore is going to do worse than the Rams, so I'd rather take that pick from Baltimore. I think it'll be a better pick. So that's what we're going to do here. We'll trade to the Baltimore Ravens, and I'll catch you guys for pick 6. Alright, and as we head in here, we did pick up that 4th round for Baltimore next year, so that'll help us out next year, but in the process, we did lose out on both of our players that we were looking to draft. So at this point, I'm willing to just take a flyer on a receiver or a running back, a corner. I think Gary Levine is going to be the pick. B+ pursuit, B+ tackle, B hit power. The combine is very average, but I think he's got enough pieces that this could eventually turn into a decent pick for us. So I'm going to grab him. That means we've doubled down at linebacker and at offensive line, which I don't know if that happens in real life, but there's just not much left on the defensive line, and the corners and receivers I'm looking at just don't have good projected statistics. This gentleman here ends up being ranked 232 out of 163 in the draft, which is not great, but 6th, 7th round, you know, gotta kind of temper your expectations. Alright, and then for the last pick in the draft, I'm really tempted to just grab this receiver here. Looks to me like Titus Hodge won the combine, so 22 years old out of Arkansas State. He's going to be my last pick in the draft, and let's see how he did here. Yeah, 55 overall, ranked 384th out of, and we picked him at 195, so, you know, it is what it is. He was projected to go in the 4th round, though. It just shows that sometimes the projections are just way off from where they end up being talent-wise. But I'm gonna skip ahead to the end of the draft here. I'm not trading back in to get anyone, so give you a recap here. Our 2020 rookie class is going to end up being 6 players. I think we drafted 6, yeah. So in round 1, we grabbed our quarterback of the future, Craig Roy. He'll sit behind Dalton this year, and hopefully by the end of the year we'll get him 2 or 3 games. Well, I mean, actually, hopefully we're in a position to make a playoff run, and in that scenario, we'll probably stick with Dalton. But on the off chance that we have a year similar to last year, hopefully we'll get him in the last couple games and get him some experience. Scarborough is going to come in, be an immediate starter on the offensive line at 77 overall. He's already better than everyone else on our offensive line, so he'll be an instant starter. I'll kind of play with the offensive line formations and see where he fits in. Kamal Key will come in and be an immediate starter for the defense. Says he's a right outside linebacker. I'll probably switch him over to left and let him compete with Nick Vigil. D'Angelo Payton comes in to the left tackle position. We'll flip him over to right tackle and have him battle with Bobby Hart. He's better than Bobby Hart, at least his overall score is better than Bobby Hart, but we'll let them compete throughout training camp, and hopefully he can be our answer to right tackle for the future. Gary Levine and Titus Hodge are just going to be some depth pieces at the linebacker and receiver position. Maybe they can get some action in preseason and beat someone out, but for now they'll just be at the back end of the roster fighting to make a spot. So that's going to do it for the draft. I'm going to wrap up the video here. Definitely hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, and we'll continue going through this year by year to try to see how long it takes to get the Bengals back to contention. If you want, leave a comment below. Let me know how I did, if you feel like it's realistic enough, what I can do to make it a little bit better. I'm always open to suggestions, but I think that's going to wrap up for this video. Until next time, Madden fans, Bengal fans, enjoy.